Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Donald J. Trump was sworn in as the 47th President of the United States this week. And on day one, as promised, he issued a slew of executive orders, including blanket pardons and commutations for January 6 insurrectionists, and ending birthright citizenship for children born in the United States to parents who lack legal status. He also rescinded 78 executive actions implemented by the Biden administration, including advancing racial equity, combating gender discrimination, lowering prescription drug costs, and addressing climate change. Up next on Another View, life for Black and Brown communities during the Trump administration. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. So let me ask you a question. How are you feeling this week? Was Monday a day of celebration and jubilance at the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States? Or was it a day of reflection and giving back in celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all that he stood for? Or are you just plain scared about what is to come, especially for marginalized communities? How do we process all that is going on? Here to give us some insight and guidance is Dr. Eric Claville, political and legal analyst and creator of the award-winning Claville Report. Hey, Eric, how you doing?
How you doing today, my sister?
Are you breathing?
Absolutely. Every day that I'm up and alive is a blessing.
There we go. Absolutely. So a flurry of executive orders, a lot of changes have gone on, but the president ran on the idea of making life affordable for everyday Americans and so forth. I want to play a clip. This is from the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer during the Democratic Senators press conference earlier this week.
Nothing that President Trump did on day one lowered grocery prices. Nothing helped Americans achieve their dream of owning a home. Nothing will help working families earn more and save more.
Now, to be fair, Trump did issue a directive aimed, not an executive order, but a directive aimed at addressing the cost of living crisis in the United States. It has no deadline, it has no start date, and it is an action. It's not an executive order.
Right.
Does it matter to him?
The answer is no. It doesn't matter based upon what he has done so far. We see that in the first day of office, he has signed more executive orders than any president in the history of the country. As a matter of fact, if you add up the last several presidencies, it doesn't equal that amount. These orders are sweeping, but it's in line with what he said he would do in Project 2025. Listen, everything he's doing is no surprise to me. It shouldn't be any surprise to anyone, even though he quote unquote was distancing himself from it. Those individuals kept going because they understand that he has to say what he had to say on the campaign trail to get elected. He's elected, they're in office, and they are off and running. So, again, it's no surprise.
But there were so many people who believed him when he said, it's all about you. It's all about the economy. Last night, he did an interview with Sean Hannity on Fox, and two things. He had said in the campaign trail he would not seek retribution against his political enemies and that the economy was important. And then this exchange happened.
He got bad advice on the way he got out of Afghanistan. We should have gotten out with strength and dignity, not like a bunch of losers. Joe Biden has very bad advisors. Somebody advised Joe Biden to give pardons to everybody but him. They wanted to take care of. Yeah, but Sean, they wanted to. I don't care.
They're yelling at me.
This is more important because right now the economy is going to do great.
I don't care, but right now the economy is going to do great.
Right. It's going to do great, right? But it is. It's going to do great for some, trust me, but not everybody. But again, President Trump is who he is. He hasn't changed. Tigers don't change their stripes, as the saying goes. He said what he had to say to get elected. He's in. Now he's going to do what he really wants to do. He's very bitter about all of the cases that he was indicted upon and convicted of some. He still is a convicted felon in office. And he's very bitter about that. So if you don't think he's going to seek retribution, I don't know who you're kidding. It's going to happen.
So let's see, where do we start? Because there's so many things that he's done. Let's start with the pardons and the commutations. January 6th, it's almost, Eric, like what we saw with our own eyes back in 2021, as far as the administration is concerned, never existed, never happened. All these people have been let go. And Americans are saying, we're not for this letting out of people who harmed police officers, who killed police officers, who, the violence and the desecration of the Capitol. But yet, they're all out. Attacked
our democracy. Again, January 6th, J6, stands as a shame, a red mark on our country's history. It will forever do that. It was terrible to watch. Couldn't believe it was happening. The world couldn't believe it was happening. And it was a very sad day. It still is a very sad day. The president clearly played a role in it. We saw the rally. Of course, whether you want to split the words that he was using to charge everyone up, everyone knew what they were there for. Now, did it start to escalate? Absolutely escalated. Individuals got there, but that's part of crowd mentality. What happens, when you're in a crowd.
Right, when you're in a crowd and the crowd starts going in one direction, that mentality happens,
Absolutely. And until, someone dies or something tragic happens, then you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? You snap out of that trance. But that's aside from that. I'll leave that to psychologists and sociologists, to flesh out. But with that, it does fly in the face of Capitol Police, of the legislators that were trapped, that barely escaped, that were lying down, that were afraid that they were going to be taken by a mob. I mean, shots were fired. Even protesters were, even the mob. They had to kill, one of them to keep them out of the from going down that hallway. The lady that was shot and killed trying to get through the door. Police officers were killed, during that time period. So there was bloodshed. So the party of law and order. Basically, their commander-in-chief at that time was the head of the largest and the most shameful act of disorder in our history currently.
And counter-terrorists and people who watch for extremist groups and all of that are warning that the extremism is going to continue. If anything, it's going to get worse now that they've been exonerated, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, they feel emboldened. They feel empowered. I mean, you commit this act of, this terrible act, and you're out. You get, not just out because you had a good lawyer, but from the president's desk, from his pen, you have a pardon. So it's as if it never happened. And that's the impact and the effect of a pardon. So with that, the former leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique, he said, hey, I mean, not him. Yeah, he said, hey, they should work. Right. And then the rioter who was dressed in the famous Viking outfit. So he
said, I'm going to go get guns.
He's a lot of them. He said, I'm going to get a lot of guns. And we shouldn't overlook those statements because those statements were made when Nancy Pelosi, her house was broken into, her husband was assaulted. He came in there to kill her. We should not overlook that. And let's just go back just a few decades, a few years. I say a few years because in our time, decades is really just a short period of time. Our civil rights leaders, were murdered as well because of that same mentality. From Medgar Edwards to King to Malcolm X to the Kennedy brothers. I mean, the list goes on and on. I named them because those are the most notable ones.
But there were many others.
Many many others, that
the Freedom Riders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That were killed. So take their words very serious. I hope that the federal agencies are taking their words very serious. Local agencies are as well, because even though they're not designated as a domestic terrorist group, they are. They absolutely are. Yeah.
One of the executive orders is to take away the birthright.
Yeah.
Of citizenship. First of all, that's going against the Constitution. So can that actually be legally enforced? And what is the ultimate consequence of that, if in fact it were to actually happen?
Yeah. So the birthright citizenship is meant strictly for, and I'm actually reading this, so we get it right, but it's the end birthright citizenship for those born to undocumented immigrants. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we all know that birthright citizenship is protected by the Constitution, and they're already going to face legal challenges on this. However, it applies to children born to mothers who were lawful temporary residents and fathers who were not citizens or lawful permanent workers. He also ordered agencies within the next 30 days not to recognize babies as citizens if their mothers were, quote, unlawfully present, unquote, at the time of birth, and the father was not a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident. So,
So explain, before you get into the legal legalities of that, explain what it means to not be a citizen. Right. In other words, what is the consequence of that?
Well, if you're not a citizen of the United States, then that means all the protections that citizens are provided, all of the benefits of being in this country, being a part of this country, are really not afforded to you. Now, you do have status as a visitor. However, there are certain resources that are not available to you. You can't collect Social Security. You can't pay into it because you're not a citizen. There are many things, social services. You can. There are some that you can as a visitor, but if you're going to sign up to receive permanent social services, like you're going to sign up for housing, no, you're a visitor. You're not a citizen. So there are a lot of things as a citizen that it's part of being. It's the benefit of being, part of that family. So the benefit of being part of our U.S. family is all the things that you can,
that we take for granted. Basically.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So with this, they're attaching that. Removing birthright citizenship to individuals who are born to individuals that are not lawfully present or that are not citizens themselves. Again, that's going to face a legal challenge. But one thing about these legal challenges, we got a Supreme Court that they will find a way. They have found a way to do whatever, allow this administration and this president to do whatever they want to do for the most part. I've only seen a handful of decisions that push back on what he wanted to do, but it was by a slim margin, maybe 6-3 at the most slim. You do have 3 hard, conservatives that are on that court, led by, of course, Clarence Thomas, that are going to justify whatever the president wants to do. So there are 5. Actually, there are 6 that are on the court. 2 that I would consider when I included Chief Justice, who was not appointed by the president, but that really look at the Constitution and really, I believe, are scholars. Amy Coney Barrett, I also would put in there. However,
because she looks at both.
Yeah, she looks at social.
She kind of goes both ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. So she's the wild card, in my opinion, in these things. So even though there will be legal challenges, to me, it's a toss-up depending on how far it actually gets up the chain.
Okay, the birthrights. What else?
We cover the pardons, the birthrights. We could do federal workers, or we could go to the energy policy, climate labs. We can do the border. We could do
and these mass deportations. Because let's talk about that for a minute, since we're talking about birthright.
Sure.
So the concern we get that the intent, or the written intent, is that they will be deporting people who are here without papers. I mean, in other words, they're here undocumented. But what happens when that spills over to people who are Hispanic, Latino, who are documented, and they get caught up in that. In other words, just like he said he was going to take the January 6th and do it case by case, but then it got too complicated. So he said, okay, fine, just do all of them.
Yeah.
Could that happen again?
Absolutely.
With the deportations?
Absolutely. It happened during the time of the Japanese internment, that time period. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at what has been declared and the act that they're using for this. But to answer your question, it is very possible, and I actually expect it to happen because of this birthright citizenship piece, right? So if you have a child that's born here right now, if you're born on this soil, you have birthright citizenship. Even if the person that gave birth to you does not have birthright citizenship. So therefore, the person that is quote unquote illegal or not documented here, under this executive order can be deported back to their country of origin. Now, with that being the case, what happens to that child? Now, they said they like to keep families together. So you could choose, they can stay here or y'all can leave together, and that's something that.
So basically that is an American citizen that is being deported.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, I could easily see that happening. But you know what? What parent would want their child, to stay here by themselves as a baby? Now, of course, what our listeners understand, there are parts of the world that are seeing a lot of unrest. There's poverty, there's war, there's famine. I mean, there is crime. There's a lot of things that are not good that is happening around the world in a lot of countries. So people risk their lives, become stowaways on ships. You have people from China that are trying to get to the United States that come from China through Peru, and then up through South America, and then from there through Central America to Mexico, all the way from the continent of Africa. You have stowaways on ships, cargo ships, underneath the ships. We're not talking about on top. We're talking about where the runners are, the risking their lives to come. And of course, some are deported, and they say they're going to do it again because the conditions in which their countries are just, to them, unlivable, right? Which is another discussion about supporting nation states. Like if we support them to become more stable, then citizens of their own nations will stay there as opposed to come here. But with that, Barbara, I could easily see that happening. Individuals that would easily come say, hey, my child will have a better chance to live than going back with me. So, and that creates a glut of orphanages, foster care, and all the other ills that come with that.
The border they just deployed 10,000, I believe.
Yes.
Military. So what did he do in his executive order to activate the military? Although they're not supposed to do any of the arrests, they're supposed to be assisting the Border Patrol, right?
Right. So let's take a look at this executive order. So he declared an emergency. First of all, he declared an emergency at the U.S. border. So what this does, this allows the president to now deploy troops and use parts of the military, more specifically National Guard, reservists there to the border. With that being the case, he's also instructed Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security to construct additional barriers, border barriers. So continue to build a wall. Now, what he's also done with this, he's designated certain international cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And what this does, this now activates certain resources to the president and through the government in order to carry out missions and so forth as relates to this foreign terrorist group. So designations mean a lot because when a national emergency or a state of emergency is declared, now that releases certain federal dollars that can flow into an area, kind of like we have a weather situation here and across the South. So with that being the case, he not only did that, but he also suspended resettlements, the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, which is resettle people. He also canceled the flights, of over 1,600 Afghans that were already cleared to come here. They cleared their documents, the whole nine, they get ready to come here, and then that's a wrap, right? So flight canceled, they're still there. And I don't know if they're going to review their papers, but they have been canceled. He also ordered Homeland Security to terminate all quote-unquote categorical parole programs that are contrary to policy of the United States, which includes those for refugees fleeing Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. In addition to that, he reinstated the remain in Mexico policy. And with that, he's also empowered officials to, quote unquote, repeal, repatriate, or remove any alien engaged in the invasion, unquote, of the southern border. So with this, he's now empowered, of course, and again, he said he would do this.
So what law allows him to do this?
So it's an act that was created in 1798. It's called the Aliens Enemies Act. Aliens Enemies Act. It was actually created, and what it does, it's a wartime authority that allows the president to detain or deport natives and citizens of an enemy nation. And the law permits the president to target immigrants without a hearing and based only on their country of birth or citizenship as well. Now, you say this is strange. How could this be? Well, it has been used. It was used, of course, 1788. It was used in the War of 1812. It was used in World War I, World War II. The Japanese internment was probably one of the most notable ones times that it was used, but it was used under that. In addition to that, that particular authority, it expulsed or created restrictions and targeting at that time Germans, Austro-Hungarian, Japanese, Italian immigrants, and so forth based on their ancestry. Mm-hmm. However, with that being the case, the question becomes, can it be used now in non-wartime? Because it also uses the term invasion and predatory incursion. So with now him in the executive order saying repel the invasion of individuals from the southern border, it actually enacts this particular act, which allows him to then send the military and do other things. Exactly. Now again, this act is still legal. All right. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. and Congress only apologized for the Japanese internment. They did not repeal this act, which doesn't allow the president to do this. So, again, and there's another case, just very quickly, just for context. In 1948, the Watkins opinion is a narrow majority of the Supreme Court, but they upheld the Truman and administration's extended reliance upon this act, saying that it was not the judiciary's place to second-guess the president on matters as political as when a war terminates or a wartime authority expires. So now, of course, only Congress can declare war. However, invasion or predatory incursion can happen without a wartime declaration. So when we talk about the splitting of words, when we talk about policies and going back to 1788 to create the actual, to use the law to effectuate the actions of this administration. Again, one thing about conservatives, and I say this amongst my group, and we talk about it, they're looking at the long-term play because the country is becoming more brown and black, right? And that particular group is becoming more, quote unquote, liberal or progressive. Now, we'll talk about what happened during this election in a moment. But what's happening is that there are certain things that you can do in the law, in the policy and law, all right, which is very powerful, that can repel or rebuff or stop or halt or pause these, quote unquote, actions of liberal progressive groups that they are looking to do. So the Heritage Foundation, they put their work in. They put their work in, and we did 3 town halls on it. We talked about it on this show. I did several shows on it on my shows. Project 2025 is in full effect.
You had a list of the Project 2025 items that they wanted to get accomplished. How many are checked off so far?
Right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 so far of a list of 20, about 21. So
about half the list.
About half the list. Yeah. Through executive order.
Through executive order, right off the bat.
That's it.
Wow. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What are you thinking about all of the changes that are happening in our country right now? And Call us and give us your thoughts and your concerns. And if you're just joining us, we are talking about what to expect in the first 100 days of the Trump administration, particularly for Black and brown communities, with political and legal analyst Dr. Eric Claville. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So we got an email from, or a Facebook post actually, from someone who wanted to know what specifically can we do here in Virginia to help those migrants, particularly those on the Eastern Shore, to offer any kind of help or assistance to them going forward. And Lisa just sent me a note. So Governor Youngkin has joined 25 other governors to pledge to work with the Trump administration on deportation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, now they're going to pledge to work with them both in policy and also providing troops. All right, that's going to happen. And Governor Youngkin himself, I mean, he is. When you look at the policies that the Trump administration, well, first of all, take styles away, right? Mm-hmm. Governor Youngkin and President Trump have different styles of persona, how they speak, and so forth. But their policies are very similar. If you look at the policies that came out of the executive orders and the agencies of Governor Youngkin's administration and what's happening now, they're very similar. Now, some, of course, with President Trump, they are more robust. I would say that. However, but here, Governor Youngkin is very, very similar. Now, with that being the case, what can we do? What can individuals do to help those individuals? Number one, I think that first of all, there's going to be a lot of challenges, legal challenges to these. So this is not going to be immediate. Now, what is immediate is the border stoppage. So the border is going to be
and not letting people in anymore. They're done.
Right. That's done. You're going to have a lot more patrols, a lot more presence, military presence, and so forth. So trying to get through from the southern border is going to be not impossible, but darn near, right? Mm-hmm. Because of what's happening. Now, of course, you can get into the country other ways. You can get it from the East Coast, West Coast, and from the north, from Canada also, right? But from the southern border, it's going to be very difficult. However, if you're here, there are programs that individuals can help to, quote unquote, help them become citizens. If they're here for work visas, that's still legal. Work visa is still legal. We're not saying nothing attacks work visa because we know we have agricultural workers from the southern border that come up and do a lot of the hard agricultural work that America's not going to do, or that we haven't automated yet to be done. But the construction work, the cleaning work, all of these jobs that fewer and fewer Americans are doing and that are very low paid, that's going to be something that corporations are going to have to work with the administration on and say, hey, listen, if we don't have these workers, to continue doing the jobs they're doing, then prices are going to skyrocket.
Hotels going down to the oceanfront for your vacation,
produce,
everything. Food, everything. It's across the board. Before we go to our phone calls, and we're coming, you guys, I want to talk about the civil DEI.
What's that?
Yes, exactly. So all DEI employees have been laid off.
Yes.
With the intention, actually are out with leave right now with the intention of layoffs. They have a week to come up with the plan to lay these folks off. They're shutting down all these programs. Yeah. What's the impact?
Well, the impact is tremendous across the board. All right. So when all DEI programs, anything dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion, for those that don't know what the acronym means, has been eliminated through the federal government. All right. Those individuals, like you said, that were hired as part of that workforce have also been either laid off, to be terminated, or they've been put on administrative leave to be let go, right?
To be terminated.
To be terminated, right? So all this is to be terminated. Keep in mind also with the federal work piece is that they've also implemented everybody back to work. So for those individuals that have moved away and are working remote and you have to come to work, a lot of that's going to be impossible to do, so you're not going to have a job afterwards. It's going to impact the bottom line of families because now where you're working from home, if not 5 days a week, 3 days a week, or whatever the case may be, you had child care that you didn't have to have. Now you need childcare. That's going to increase costs. It's going to increase traffic. That's going to increase commute times. It's going to increase everything. And will it be more productive? I don't think so. Studies show that it may not. That persons are more productive working virtually and getting a lot more done with less cost. With that being the case, as it relates to DEI, though, this is going to have reverberating effects down to the corporate level as well, right? Because we saw challenges with that. They call them "quote unquote" preference programs and so forth. These aren't preference programs. These are programs that are created in order to right the wrongs. Because even when you had what's considered a quote unquote qualified, what is considered a quote unquote minority, they were still looked over because of the preference given to, at that time, white males, and still now, and then from there. So with that being the case, diversity, equity, and inclusion was also under attack during the campaign, and it is being effectuated right now to eliminate that across the board.
And it is going. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Pam joins us from Williamsburg. Hi, Pam. You're on the air. Hello? Hello, Pam. No, Pam? Okay. Let's go to Gail in Columbia, South Carolina. Hi, Gail. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
I got a question about social and health programs that perhaps will be under attack by the Trump administration.
You want to know which ones?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, are we talking Medicare, Medicaid?
Okay.
If there's any interest in Social Security on his part, health programs like Obamacare, any information where there might be some problems with them attacking those programs as well.
Okay. Thank you for the call, Gail. We appreciate you. Go ahead.
Gail, thank you so much. I thought you were Gail King calling in for a second. But with that being the case, the answer is yes. Part of Project 2025 is to cut the growth of government spending to reduce inflation. One of the executive orders that he implemented was also to remove the government looking for low-cost medications under Biden.
Right.
So guess what? Now the
drug companies can go back to charging whatever they want.
Exactly. This is a corporate president. It's a corporate cabinet. This is a corporate interest. So they are very first interested in corporate interests, which is money. The things that we talked about earlier are social issues, right? When you take a look at what's happening now, of course, it becomes an economic issue, but there are social issues. That's what we call red meat. Red meat for voters and base voters and supporters of groups. The ban on biological males competing in sports. Transgender. That's red meat. Now, but there's also a winning issue in elections, and I'll talk about that later on because we got a gubernatorial election coming up. But when he talks about de-weaponizing the federal government by increasing accountability and oversight, these are all buzzwords that really have no substance behind it other than to do their bidding to remove protections. Even the executive order for civil rights, an EEOC under Lyndon Baines Johnson was also repealed under the executive order. Think about that.
That's right, from 65.
Yeah, think about that. All right,
Wow.
we're talking 1965. We're talking about utilizing an act from 1798.
But Eric, he also said, and this is according to a article from the Washington Post, and he talks about so tens of thousands of workers put on notice that officials would not tolerate any efforts to disguise these programs by using coded or imprecise language. And then they're sending out an email giving employees 10 days to report their observations to a special email account without risking disciplinary action. I mean, he's asking employees to report on each other as if they think that somebody's doing something that has something to do with DEI. I mean, can you imagine what that office must feel like? First, everybody's mad because they got to go back in to the office, and now you have employees spying on each other.
Yeah. So do we have a Black History Month program? Do we have a Women's History Month program? Do we have a Pacific Asian Americans program?
As a matter of fact, I read this morning about one department that was supposed to do a celebration of Martin Luther King on the 29th, and they've had to cancel it.
Yep.
You know, wow.
So again, you know, this is the heartbeat of, you know, well, I'll say this is the heartbeat of America because this is America voted for.
Yeah.
All right. So let's make that plain. All right. This is the heartbeat of America. Majority of voters in America voted for this president because this is their heartbeat. Now, you have a handful that are bold enough to effectuate the heart. However, this is the heartbeat of America.
The message: these programs divided Americans by race, wasted taxpayer dollars, and resulted in shameful discrimination. But yet, everything that's happening, I don't know, it just seems very contradictory to me. Doreen joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Doreen. You're on the air. Doreen? Hello?
Morning.
Hi. You're on the air. You're on the air.
Oh, I apologize, Barbara. Yes, ma'am. I was giving you a call to ask the question of the guest if he believes that there will ever be another free and fair election. And if so, why do you believe that? What leads you to believe that that's possible? And the second question would be, if you have time, why does it seem that the Democrats are powerless to undo or to fight or to challenge anything that the conservative Republicans have put forth? And then I will just take your answer off the air.
Okay. Thank you, Doreen, for calling. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Do you think there'll be a free and fair election?
Well, we've had
we had one, right?
Right. I mean, again, you know, President Trump won, and the Democrats did not, you know, try to destroy democracy by doing what the Trump supporters did in January 6th of 2021. We've had free and fair elections across the country for decades. I mean, so we've never had a presidential election that was fraudulent and things of that nature. So to the caller,
so the election has always been free and fair.
Yeah,
we just in 2021 though had people saying we don't like the outcome, so therefore we're going to run over the can. We're going to try to stop it.
Right, because their whole mission was to stop Congress from certifying the election. Right. You know, the minority leader of the House, when he spoke, he said, you know, there are no, on our side, he congratulated President Trump. Of course, Republicans stood up and clapped. And he said, but there are no election deniers on the Democratic side, on our side. And he sat down and Democrats, of course, stood up. Because again, and words mean something. They mean a lot. That's why the rhetoric behind false information, lies, is very damaging. Because, as the caller mentioned, fair and free election, we've always had fair and free elections. Where that is coming from is if a person doesn't win, then they're a sore loser. So therefore, it wasn't fair. Right. And what that creates, unfortunately, a message that is incorrect. So to the caller, we've always had fair and free elections. And the Democrats, because they're in with politics, because you're in the minority, meaning that you don't have the majority in a certain house, there are certain things that you can't do. However, through elections, you can do a lot. There are also maneuvers within Congress. You can do a lot of things. Some things need a simple majority. Some actions need 2/3 of Congress. And again, you can filibuster. You can do all different kinds of things. But at the end of the day, elections matter and numbers matter. So if you want the power, then you have to get your people in.
I want to take one more call, and then I want to come back to ask you a quick question. Susan joins us. Not sure where you are. Oh, Virginia Beach. Hi, Susan. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just concerned about everything that's happening, as are a lot of people. And I know it's going to affect many things, our economy, jobs, child care, as you have been discussing, what kind of recourse do we have? Can we expect that lawyers are going to be busy and attorneys generals are going to be busy to counteract some of these things that have happened?
Thank you, Susan, for the call. Go
Yes.
ahead.
So to answer your question, caller, the answer is yes, AGs are going to be busy in some states. Well, all states, because some AGs are going to say, hey, we support this in Republican conservative states. Others are going to say no. Mm-hmm. But even in those states where there's support, that there are some things that are going to impact them more so than others. Case in point, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have a Republican governor and executive branch. However, the decline or the loss of jobs in the federal government is going to impact Virginia extremely hard because Northern Virginia, everybody knows, the suburbs of D.C., right? Now, in Hampton Roads, our military installations and what we do to support the shipyard and things of that nature are going to do very well because now we're in a time where we're escalating into a wartime as well. We don't have time to talk about that, but again, you should be worried, but at the same time, we knew this was going to happen if you simply persons read and understood what was taking place. What they showed you, the playbook, it was a little bit over 900 pages, but there was if you go to the website, it's got some points there, bullet points. But at the same time, keep in mind, this is the president and the administration that the United States elected. So this is what comes with it.
So clearly, in the 4 years between the end of the first Trump presidency and now, folks behind the scenes were doing a lot of homework.
Absolutely.
And they were figuring it out.
Yeah.
Is that a playbook that Democrats need to take to pick a person who can run in the next election to be able? So we need to be just as prepared, or Democrats need to be just as prepared as the Republican conservatives, who clearly, like you said, see the long game.
Absolutely. I did a show on my show called Justice McConnell. Right. Justice McConnell had purpose in his heart 40 years ago when Bork was denied a seat on the Supreme Court, and he saw what Democrats did to stop it, and it got under his skin, and he started at that moment to stack the court to what we have today, and we mean not just the Supreme Court, but from the bottom up, district court, appeals court, specialty courts, and then of course the Supreme Court, because a lot of cases don't make it to the Supreme Court. They get stopped in the district court. If they have money to make it to the appeal, they'll get stopped there too. But to your point, that's a playbook for both parties, because keep in mind, Trump cannot run again. This is it for him. Constitution, you can only serve 2 terms, either consecutive or non-consecutive, or 10 years. So after this term, he can't run again. So now they're looking for their next as well.
Is there a constitutional, just like he took the birthright, or it's taking the birthright, what is that, the 14th Amendment, to justify losing birthright citizenship? Is there anything in the Constitution that he can use to try to stay in office?
No, you can't. Now, of course, you could suspend. Now, this is a whole nother issue, but
it's always
right. So, but there is a provision. I want to say it's a Patriot Act, but you can't suspend law if there is like a wartime that we have or a need to do so, which would then allow that person to serve longer. But yeah.
Okay. Kurt wrote us from Smithfield, wants to know, does President Trump have the authority to reverse the TikTok decision since Congress had already?
Well, he did pause it. Yeah.
He can pause it, but can he reverse it and say, no, we're going to keep him?
No, it's something that has to be worked out. But no, he cannot on his own accord totally reverse. However, he did pause it though. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So it's a 75-day pause, I believe.
Got you. Mark joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Hey, good afternoon. Dr. Claville, I normally agree with you on everything. You and I disagreed on who would win. You were wrong, and I was right. And I have to disagree with you. A lot of people think first of all, let me just say I'm in construction over 20-some years, and people think that Hispanic labor is cheaper, but take it from a Class A general contractor, that's not true. These Hispanic workers, they know their work, they know their value in the marketplace, and they charge accordingly for that. So it's not like a lot of people just getting Hispanic workers because they're cheap, because that's really a misnomer. The second thing I would say is that something bold and big had to be done in this country. Now, whether or not what's coming is what needed to happen, but I think that for Black people in the United States of America, I think that this may force us into what we've never tried, and that's unity. So I'm looking forward to see what this backlash is going to look like and to see how resilient our community is in order to turn inward. And the last thing I like to say is there is a huge gap between you academics, I'm college degree, and I'm putting myself in it, from where I work in construction at the bottom. And that's what this whole election was missed. There is a big gap between the Black bourgeoisie and those of us at the street level that understand it. And I think until we get a grasp on that and acknowledge that disparity and that big gap, we're going to be having this conversation for the next 3 or 4 election cycles.
Okay, Mark, thanks so much for your call. You want to respond to Mr. Mark?
Oh, absolutely. And Mark, I do remember a conversation we had at the Black History Program for my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. But to your point, we have African American. We have that's a misnomer. We have had unity in this country. Of course, we unified, over the first civil rights movement, which was the end abolishing slavery. We unified over Reconstruction. We unified over the classical civil rights. We unified during a time period of Jim Crow when we lived together and so forth. Now, to your point, I do agree, Mark, that there is a growing divide between the quote-unquote educated class and the blue-collar class, right? And I'll say college-educated and blue-collar workers. I don't like to use the word uneducated because, to me, that's demeaning. Right. Just because you don't go to college doesn't mean
you're not educated. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I don't use that term, that designation. But to your point, the income divide between that group and also the access to systems and institutions between that group is a great divide. However, you see the divide in every single group. As white Americans, the working class white, they can't access Donald Trump. They can't access Jeff Bezos. They can't access the quote unquote president of Georgetown. They can't access those individuals. They can't do it, right? But what they do is they can access institutions and resources that other groups cannot access and be accepted in those groups and get the benefit of the doubt within society. The last point I just want to mention to Mark, as far as the construction piece goes, I'm not sure if a lot of construction sites are paying payroll taxes on their labor as well that individuals hire for. But when a person is documented, when a person knows their craft, they can charge what they want. And he's right. You can charge your rate. But overall, there is
especially if you're undocumented, you're not going to make a whole big fuss over money because you just want to make a living and stay under the radar. Yeah. We got about 5 minutes left. I do want to talk about the whole Justice Department freeze and the fact that they're saying now, they're reviewing cases from 90 days ago. So that's like, the consent decree with Minneapolis police, things of that nature, which directly affects the Black community because that's where a lot of these police issues have occurred. And now that might be eliminated. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen at this point.
No, I think it will be eliminated. But to your point, one of the orders was to freeze all investigations through the Office of Civil Rights and any pending investigations, right? And I remember during the time of Clarence Thomas' time as head of the EEOC, when he was appointed, that's how he got his start. No cases came out of that particular division go to the Supreme Court. So again, this is rolling back a lot of protections that were afforded to people that people of color, poor people that don't have any other or can't access those institutions, right? Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, the Minneapolis police, they didn't willfully turn over the tapes and so forth from their officer, Derek Chauvin, who's a convicted murderer of murdering George Floyd. Mm-hmm. They actually agreed with it. It wasn't until they were compelled to do so. There's another issue now in Minneapolis where an educated black neighbor of someone white was shot by his neighbor. Yep. And the police, it took him, I think, a week to arrest the guy. And so forth and so on. And the guy would constantly berate and threaten the black and
his
neighbor
of
color.
That's right. I remember the story.
So with that, again, these are people that are in our society that are obeying the laws, right? And there are actors, bad actors of our institutions that abuse their power up on these individuals and commit these atrocities upon them, and they have no recourse because they are literally at the mercy of the actors of these institutions. Mm-hmm. So therefore, the only recourse is a Civil Rights Act, and now that's being taken away
federally. Yes, federally. So in the last 2.5 minutes or so that we have, what should we do? How do we breathe? In other words, particularly for African Americans, what do we need to be paying attention to, right, and how should we be navigating right now?
Well, first of all, I think what Mark said, I think is right. He said something big had to happen to wake people up, and I'm using that generally. He specifically said for a specific group. I'm not saying for everyone. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need a big wake up call to let you know where you are. Sometimes you need a jolt in your personal life to say, "Hey, I need to get back on track and do X, Y, Z." Our democracy, our freedom, the freedoms that we have here in this country, is very, very fragile. And without protecting that and being honest with each other and working with each other, those things can be taken away over a fallacy. It happened in Germany. It happened in other countries with dictatorships, right? It's happening in China with the atrocities that's being committed upon an ethnic minority there. Mm-hmm. It can happen. It happened here, right? It can happen again if we're not vigilant. Now, number one, you got to read. Project 2025 is on the website. It's called project2025.org. Project2025.org. I said it again, project2025.org.
Become informed.
It's there in plain sight. It'll let you know exactly what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Pay attention to, go to the White House website, what's taking place, and contact get your groups together, your community groups, like y'all connect over TikTok and all that stuff, and then start to talk about these issues and raise them with your elected officials to fight against that. And then you galvanize for change at the ballot booth moving forward. 2025, 26, 27, 28 is here.
Vote every year. Thank you, Eric. As always, we'll be talking a lot. And thank you, audience, for sharing an hour of your life with us here on Another View. Now, you can listen to this show again or any Another View program on our website, whro.org/anotherview, on Spotify, or wherever you go for your podcast listening pleasure. Next week on Another View on health with cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby. Now, he's going to be talking about the connection between alcohol and cancer. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Remember, the best way to navigate this new political norm is to be informed. Get the facts, then form your own opinion. Find a trusted news source and do your homework. Stay positive and stay focused, everybody. And I'll see you again, or listen to me again, next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever. Whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.